You are listening to Radio Belvaspata, South Africa. This show is dedicated to those who live and love from the heart in infinite ways. In today's episode, we will discuss, share, gain insights, and get clarity on the wisdom and teachings of the mystic and seer Almin, as well as discover more about the miraculous healing modality called Belvaspata. Your host for this show is Paul.
And a warm welcome to Radio Belvaspata, South Africa, on a cold evening here in Johannesburg. Thank you for tuning in. Tonight we are going to be discussing and looking at some of the insights that we are gaining as to the current status quo and conditions that many of us are experiencing. And we are calling our show Waves of Consciousness and Transcendence. The seer and mystic Almin says that we should believe in nothing, for only then can one freely and effortlessly know. Later on in the show, we're going to be going through some of the current symptoms that many of us seem to be experiencing, and on some very, very intense levels for many of us. And for some of us, it is also just light and easy work, depending on where each one of us is on our own journey into ascension and as our consciousness unfolds. So everyone on earth is feeling this transformation. But what we've got to start off with right now is the Master Diane has given to us a beautiful audio, and I'd like to share that with you right now.
Good evening to our Thursday podcast. Welcome to all our listeners. As we all walk this journey together, we can agree that it all started with a longing for, or a realization of, something more. That longing manifested and took root as our perception widened to include all the other dimensions within us. As our consciousness is raised, greater possibilities come into being. We move from what language calls it, a state of ego identification, where we believe the characters on the stage of life to be real, to be us. Then we move into a kind of God consciousness, where we know that the role is just that, and that it is not us. And then a kind of evolved consciousness, where our depth of knowing reveals that there is only one being in existence. It seems that even this benevolent body of ours is wired for consciousness. We look at the beta waves, which reveal alertness, overthinking. The alpha waves, which reveal a state of daydreaming, conducive almost as a kind of gateway to meditation. The theta brain waves reveal deep states of meditation and peak spiritual experiences. Higher states of consciousness are revealed by the theta brain waves. The delta brain waves of a kind of slow wave sleep, a kind of bridge to what Jung called the collective unconscious. Almin says that we are the door to everything. She says that outer space folds over into inner space, over the edge of our awareness. One flows into the other, the way the ocean and a current within it flow into each other. Now, to allow this flow, to allow this wave to move effortlessly, we have to be vigilant. We have to stalk the illusions of density. And one of these that we have to be aware of is the emotional pollutants. They invade our being. We cannot allow our emotions to become hostile and polluted. And removing that which pollutes in our own life, we also save the waters of the earth. Almin suggests in a post this week that we also eliminate the clutter in our lives, literally and figuratively. Those cupboards full of stuff Now I know I need to do that. I love having all my treasures around me, but eventually they become a ball and chain around your feet. Almin also suggests that we reduce contact with those who no longer inspire us, and we allow for graceful farewells. She also says that those commitments that keep us so busy that we feel we have to attend to based on another's expectations, they too have to go. We need to weed our garden, literally, figuratively, as a symbolic act on behalf of the planet. We have to allow that inner warrior to weed out the toxic and the dysfunctional. And talking of dysfunctionality, one of these ways is to avoid sensational bad news on our news media, which plays again and again tragic events. We can no longer marvel or feel repelled by the dysfunctional actions of mankind. Now, if we interact with all those around us, remembering that everything is alive, that we are all one vibratory system, then the interacting with water, with food, with our objects from daily life allows our awareness to open. All the while being aware of our own sacred space. Now there are tools that we can use. There are tools at our disposal to move through these illusions of density. The magenta light is one of them. Moving through the black waters of the Hariknit. Kalima, which dissolves illusion. This will allow for greater clarity and wider perspective. Because we can only ever understand that which is in our reality, we must pay attention to this little bit of reality. We must pay attention to our feelings, which in turn allow us to access the subtle currents of the inner senses. Now we know that the inner senses interpret and respond to the unfolding intent of the infinite. We are the door of everything. We stand on the edge of space and time. We cannot rely on our outer senses to deliver us greater consciousness. However, they are tools that have higher functions, and once those are activated, the preferences that we have to value one thing over another begin to dissolve. We become inclusive rather than exclusive. Our senses that perceive according to assumption and social conditionings are vulnerable. They are vulnerable to control and manipulation. And they lose their ability to discern and trust what is real. Our program senses cause stagnation. They cause a lack of movement. Whereas, in truth, life fluidly shapes and reshapes according to our consciousness. A consciousness that is beyond all beliefs would perceive the world as a moving ocean. The fluidity of our consciousness determines the speed and movement of life. Now, the gland for the ever-moving quality of life is the thyroid. And when life is engaged from the unified field of inner and outer senses, all becomes fluid and new in each moment. The last webinar on boundlessness highlights the landscape of a life without boundaries, a life where intuition and effortlessness abounds. Now, Almin has gifted a sigil to awaken the sensual delight that heals the thyroid center. And this will help in evolving the body that has been neglected through self-abandonment. Self-abandonment is the root of all addiction, whether it's addiction to food, to exercise. These addictions trap consciousness and trap resources, hindering the ability to heal or evolve. The antidote to a life driven by addictions is the full presencing of the inner senses. I have that sigil in front of me now, and I will follow the movements of the sigil with my hand. And as I do this, imagine the sensual delights of this wonderful world that we live in. Imagine and envision the I Am presence of the infinite, filling every cell, lighting every little nook and cranny of our inner and outer senses. And with that thought, I leave you tonight. Farewell and good night.
And you're back in studio with myself, Paul. You're listening to Radio Belvaspatar South Africa's episode for Thursday, the 15th of June, 2017. Thank you very much for tuning in and staying with us either live tonight or later in the podcast version. That was the beautiful Master Diane sharing from her heart there, really the understandings and the work that she's been doing. And of course, last week we had another audio from her that really highlighted the aspects of living and trusting our being to live in surrendered awareness. And we spoke last week about how, the aspects of living in trust and living in surrendered trust had actually transmuted into an aspect of opening one's awareness. And there Diane was really sharing with us about the inner senses and maintaining the presence of that. I loved the aspect she brought in about the quality of life and how it's linked, and then working with the inner and outer senses. I liked your description of self-abandonment and the addiction to this particular process. And I think it's such a relevant process and conversation that she's having with us at this particular point, because it highlights a lot of the experiences many of us seem to be having. And I know, once again, I just share my beautiful gift here is that, through being part of Team Belvaspatar South Africa, that I'm able to hear a lot of stories from everyone around us and just to be able to link them together. And I think this radio show has really developed to a place where we can just share and be in oneness together wherever we are around the world, which, by the way, is about 37 different countries by now. Really incredible watching the growth process that's happening there. And then Diane was really just highlighting that particular process, and incredible to see that the growth, if I can use that word, the actually ability to hold that awareness is now manifested. So in the show later tonight, we're going to talk about these aspects. We've got some more audio from the Seer Almin coming up, and we've got a little light meditation at the end of the show. But everyone on earth is absolutely feeling the transformation that's going on. And as we move through this year, the weight of our do's and don'ts, and they just seem to get heavier and heavier. They seem to get more denser and more solid than any time in the past. And Almin mentions how things have become very, very intense for her. They gather around and cement themselves at our feet, creating an immovable sinking feeling. Our intentions chomp at the bit. Our soul gives us the green light, but that aspect of us, that incredible self within, seems to stand tall and still. We sink deeper and deeper into despair at times, and also into disrepair. And as we beat ourselves with the proverbial wet noodle, we spend vast amounts of energy disagreeing with ourselves of our shoulds and our supposed to, etc., etc. We have to realize that our current position is what it is, and we spoke about, working with the status quo each week and just holding that awareness of whatever we have at this moment is what it is. And trying to tame what seems to be the wild beast of indecision, and that's a monster that holds us back a lot. It's always blocking our way into happiness, into love, and into abundance. With the amount of energy that we spend on arguing with ourselves, we could build malls and towers, we could sculpt, and maybe even create a great pyramid or two. Yet we still stand still, and as we sink deep into the quicksand of immobility, into the quagmire of non-action, we continually sabotage our dreams, our desires, our future, in an effort to save the rainforests of the old self. We hold tight to that which once served us, numbing our ability to move into the new, into the shinier, and the bright future of our dreams. Why are we afraid to move forward? Why are we afraid to take action and to act upon what we know needs to be brought into being? Everyone on earth is feeling the transformation. We all know that there is no staying in the comfort zone and that there's no point of arrival. It's called the null and the void zone. We know it's time to get up off the benches of the old self of the past and move into the playing fields of the new, of what we can call the now. Yet, when it comes our turn to bat, we freeze, frozen still in all of the possibilities, the new doorways and the wonders of our future. To embrace this popsicle consciousness, it's a bit like Frosty the Snowman, waiting fearfully for spring, knowing the change is inevitable. Frosty could move into a pattern that assisted this change, but chooses not to. And as we learn to accept the transformation that is happening within our lives, we must understand humanity's destiny, and it's designed to change, and for change, it's able to do that. Like water, we each have the potential to experience many forms. We have our liquid days, fluid days, we have our solid days, our vaporous days, and our evaporated days. We can be as an iceberg, a stream, a cloud, a raindrop, mist, or an ocean. We are 90% water on a physical level, or so science tells us. We ebb and flow with every new thought, every sunrise, every storm, every eclipse. Yet year after year, we yearn to stay still, to stay stuck, stay constant and in our comfort zone. The only true constant that we really have is the fact that we always shift and change. And perhaps we can also add to that we are also looking for truth in everything that we are dealing with. Understand that the restlessness and yearning within you are promptings and pushings from the universe, which is also undergoing massive transformation continuously. Gentle reminders that it's time to let go, it's time to go, and it's time to change are all around us. Resistance is no longer fertile. Nothing can grow in your resistance. Embrace the word action, which means I act on. You are not moving into a future that is less than, because change always walks hand in hand with the energy of more. You can be nothing less, but you can always, always be more. Everyone on earth is feeling the transformation. Are you feeling the transformation too? Well, of course you are. Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to this beautiful radio show that we are privileged to facilitate and work with every single week. Rumi tells us that life is a balance between holding on and letting go. What we're going to do now is we're going to go back to an earlier audio from the, given by the mystic in Sialmin. And this was an interesting process. This was just before she had her medical emergency, an event which she shared about a lot of these processes that went on before she had a medical emergency going on. So that's history for many of us. We understand that. We don't have to go into the details of it. But we need to understand what Almin went through at that particular point and what it has released for all of us to begin to work with and why it is coming up to the surface now. And this is an audio from her, and she says, why was I able to open the lower underworld as she goes into the aspects of the subconscious? And for me, I think that we are working on such deep levels of working with that at this moment. Yeah, we'll see on the other side of this audio.
During our last silent retreat, certain very pertinent questions arose. As I did my blessings each day on the participants, and I looked through them the way a seer looks through a seer stone, like an oracle, and I saw that these questions were waiting to be answered. During this webinar, we will attempt to do just that. The first question was, why is the refugee situation happening? How can future friction between nations, races, and tribes of different levels of development be avoided, especially when they end up in one country, like what is happening in Europe? The refugee situation is happening because during the end of December 2014 and January of 2015, while I was in a 6-week coma, I went down into what is the lower underworld and was able to find a lot of soul groups that had been captured there by black magic And, in some instances, their place was taken by those who had no right to be on earth. So I found there Jews, I found huge numbers of Chinese, I found there other groups of people as well. Some were actually Germans. So why was it necessary for me to unlock the gates so that they could make their refugee exodus and come into the middle world, which is our reality? Why was I able to do that? Because we have solved enough of our own illusions. We have purified ourselves enough over these past years to justify opening the doors to the subconscious, something our behaviorists don't even know exists. It is a lower level in which things have been stuffed that we have not been aware of. The subconscious has a very strong influence on our daily life, but this has a strong influence on the subconscious. So it was time for us to open the gates and start to examine some of the emotions, the misperceptions, and so on that we had buried there. The subconscious equates to the underworld of the planet.
So there we were listening to the mystic and Sir Almin explain what happened when she went into a coma almost 2 years back, I think it is now, literally explaining how she went into the underworld and how it's also released everything that's from the subconscious really into our day-to-day lives, into our experiences, and how we are learning to dissolve them. So for many of us, that's an extremely difficult task, and I have felt the last few weeks to be extremely intense in terms of being able to hold myself, work with myself, on just being consistent within, my day-to-day process. And we'd love to hear from you too. Please just send us a message now on Spreaker.com's page that we're listening to, or, put it up onto our Facebook page, or if you're on our WhatsApp group, then let us know what is going on there as well. Just really interesting to get the feedback from everybody. I think sometimes there's a belief system within us that we don't like to voice these intense moments because we feel that somehow, there's a program deep within the self that says, no, you've got to bear it and you've got to do all of this and you've got to cope with it. And sometimes what we do is we go into these states of self-abandonment, which Diane was referring to earlier, where we just ignore it and hope that it goes away. But of course, there it all comes up on the surface. I'm finding an intense amount of physical exhaustion going on. And again, I've just come down with a light flu or a cold, let's put it that way. And that's just taking its toll on me in terms of I'm having to sit back and just examine things. But literally, that's a good thing too, because it's giving me a few minutes and a few moments of each day just to sit back and have a look at the way things are and just focus on allowing myself to be part of this transformation. And as we were saying last week, trusting the awareness of the moment is starting to work with it. So what we've got now is just to add to this particular moment and not to harbor on any of the issues that we are all dealing with, because if we're not careful, like Diane says, they become part of, the addiction process through ego consciousness. But let's look at some of the symptoms that many people are experiencing. And there's a particular bit of information that I managed to download earlier this week, and it's about becoming a crystal human. And there's 11 symptoms there that they are discussing. And of course, we've got to understand that the fluidity of self is shifting so much to a more crystalline form as we are merging on a physical and emotional, spiritual level, however we're going to phrase that. So you might have your own way to work through all of that. But let's just look at these particular 11 symptoms. Because there are people who make this transition that we are talking about in a relatively gentle way, but there's many of us who experience a crisis when this happens. Yes, you know who you are. These are usually the people who have chosen to open up to much higher dimensions and open up far more quickly. So, of course, the frequency overload that comes in becomes much more intense. The choice is not made logically, of course, for them. It's not made logically by the rational mind, but it is rather a soul choice made in response to the available transitional energies of the earth herself. And we've had a show where we talked about the frequency and the Schumann resonance rates of the earth, how it's like shooting up and up and up, and it has not gone back to its old self. In fact, it is exponentially increasing every single week. And so we are opening up to higher and higher frequencies and bringing them in at the same time. So let's look at this. So the first symptom, experience that's in the process of crisis or breakthrough or this transition phase, let's not call it right or wrong, but just identify it as such, is that we get a sudden extreme sensitivity to people and environments. We might have been previously sociable, but suddenly find we can't bear to be near a lot of people, like shopping malls, restaurants, crowded environments, such places like that. So if that works for you, tick that off. There's an increase in psychic ability and awareness. As we expand our awareness, we begin to incorporate far more things into our being, into our experiences. We're almost able to hear the inner thoughts and feelings of others. I know I've been really, really sensitive to that, and I've got to be careful that I don't react to what I see going on around that, because this is my journey, and when I'm feeling that about others, it's not my place to say or do anything but simply work with what I've got and own that for myself. So, but very disconcerting if you're not careful. So there's something that you need to look at. There's also an extreme sensitivity to negative energy in certain environments or people, perhaps closely linked to the first two symptoms, but we just don't seem to any longer have the inability or have the ability to tolerate certain people who may have previously been close to us. It can, this increased sensitivity can lead to things like panic attacks or create more anxiety. These can occur at any time, even when we wake up at night. Often there's no valid reason for the anxiety attack, although we'll often seek to find a reason to try and logicize it or rationalize it. Right, so the fourth one, we might also find ourselves zoning out for long periods of time, just wanting to sit and do nothing. We spoke a little bit about this over the last few shows, how even when we're speaking to somebody else in a conversation, we suddenly just zone out and walk away and go do something else, and then remember we hadn't finished our conversation and come back again. Luckily around us, with me and Nico, we understand this, so we just come back to what we're doing and finish the sentence when need be. But sometimes, it takes 2 or 3 attempts to literally finish a sentence or finish a particular project. It's as if we are so focused on doing something else, and Nick and I are having to learn just to sit back and sit down for a few moments and just actually have a discussion and then try and finish it. So if that's going to work for you, that's great. But remember, we're also moving into higher dimensions, and we are incorporating those higher dimensions into our process. And as we are dissolving the matrices between these between these different realms, then of course all of these dimensions are coming crashing together. So we're just adjusting to spending more time in these dimensions and less time in the dimensions that we used to. Slow down a little bit, I think, is the message, and I'd like to follow that piece of advice for myself. The fifth symptom that we're going to look at is obsessive anxieties about humans being destroyed. Things like by pollution or lack of resources, by aliens and technology, etc. Hey, everybody in Benoni, in our town here, east of Johannesburg, do you know there was an UFO sighting today? So, fascinating insight for that. Now, what is a UFO? I don't know if it's a soccer ball flying overhead or just a flash of light or a realm opening or a ship or whatever, but there we go. It's reported on ufosa.com. It is there for us to actually look at. So for those who know the town, Willamore Park was the place that they're talking about. Right, so we must understand that multi-dimensional consciousness can access all levels of where we are at any one particular part. It includes that part which holds our fears and anxieties about the survival of our species or even our own survival in ego identity. Right, we've got to look at all of that. The sixth one, an obsessive need to understand what is happening. I get trapped sometimes in the mental spheres of wanting to know and wanting to find out why, and then I have to actually let it all go for a while and just say, hang on a second, don't create identities around anything. But this can lead to suffering from mental burnout if you're not careful. So just take care with yourself and just let go, because we only have this moment. And as Almin has said to us, there's no point of arrival. So let's just work with what we've got done. Let's get attached or addicted to thinking, overthinking, or overfeeling anything, because the realities are all shifting and changing. Number 7, a big one for many, depression for no reason. And sometimes related to that state of crisis where there's just absolute breakdowns, absolute just letting go, not being able to cope on so many levels. It's just the consciousness clearing out the old layers of energy that need to be released. We cannot be the same at this moment and allow ourselves the understanding that we are able to transform, and we are in a state of great transformation constantly. So we don't have to process or relive these kinds of experiences. We just need to allow the body to release the energy through grounding it, through resting, and of course through the right form of nutrition. Because for me, I've noticed is that I've got so busy lately with all the different projects and processes that if I'm not careful, I'm not actually eating accurately. So we're having a look at that at the moment. The 8th symptom, a big one for many, the disrupted sleep patterns that are going on, or exactly the opposite, where you are dead to the world as soon as you hit the pillow. But many people are waking up 3-4 times a night, at specific times even, and this is just our consciousness adapting to new cycles of activity. I, for myself, am exhausted. I go to sleep. I wake up 2 hours later. I've got plenty energy. I want to go and do things, and then I need to go sleep again. And it's like this whole new change is coming. You don't get your 8 hours sleep any longer, or 9 hours sleep. You get 2 or 3, then you do something for 2 or 3 hours, and then you go back to sleep. And it just seems you're able to, work through all of those. Very, very interesting. Some people are also getting aspects of what they call electrical energy waves through the body. That are all this kind of thing that's going on, because our bodies are becoming increasingly and incredibly sensitive, and we're feeling the solar waves, the lunar waves, the cosmic waves and energies that are coming in from everywhere. So the body is actually taking it in, expressing it, and then working through all of that. The 9th symptom I want to discuss with all of us is that there's a whole range of physical sensations and experiences, and we could say these usually relate to a detoxification process, because the body can hold no toxins. And we'll hear the Almin ultimate state of detachment. So if we are thinking that we need to hold on to stuff, of course, that's going to create a whole crisis all by itself. The release is always through the physical body, and it presents symptoms such as intense fatigue, muscle and joint pains, especially in the hips and knees, headaches, especially at the base of the skull, and neck and shoulder pains. So somebody who's listening to the show tonight is going to get a Dropbox link in a few minutes, and a meditation with Almin about releasing the joints and debris within the body. If anybody else wants that link, please send it to us, and then we'll post it up. But probably we'll just post it up in the WhatsApp group anyway. If anybody else wants it, then please let us know. It can go up on our Facebook page, or you can get it by email. There's also another big symptom as well, an increased appetite and putting on of weight. But there's also a decrease in appetite and a putting up of weight. Nico and I have been discussing this, and it's quite amazing as to that process. And we are thinking that we need to create a different form of nutrition, that the body can no longer cope with the earlier nutrition that we were putting into it. And it's actually just shifting its dimensions, it's shifting its process. So have a look at that as well for yourself. But then, of course, we need to also maintain that particular status quo in terms of making sure we are nurtured, but without the need for it. So these are different programmings that are coming up. So yes, thanks everybody who's putting up messages at the moment on our Spreaker.com page. We appreciate it, and we'll see if we can get into that in a few minutes. Right, the 11th symptom is the ability to see beyond the veils. Yes, there you go. That's to become aware of everything what we used to call on a spiritual level, angels, spiritual beings, etc., as a reality, and to be able to communicate openly and easily with these. It goes with some of the earlier things we spoke about, an increase in psychic ability and awareness, but it can be very frightening for some people if we're not accustomed to seeing this kind of dimensional awareness. So, yeah, there we are with some of that. What I'd like to do now is just go into an aspect of something that I've discovered this week on a scientific level, and I thought it's important to share because, this is the year of high magic, and Almin talked about the functions of the brain earlier this year, I think January, and gave beautiful audio and classes on all of that. And it's always stayed with me as to the different aspects of where the brain comes into play and what actually happens there. The human brain can create linking the 11 dimensions with the 11 symptoms, and I'm saying those 11 symptoms are probably related to a particular dimensional process per symptom. So one dimension, one symptom, and that's, just here, so that's just my take on it, but again, research all to do with the neocortex. But neuroscientists have used a classic branch of math in a totally new way to peer into the structure of our brains. What they've discovered is that the brain is full of multi-dimensional geometrical structures operating in as many as 11 dimensions. So I'm going to add a little bit there as 11 dimensions that they can see at this moment. We're used to thinking of the world from a 3D perspective. So this may sound a bit tricky, but the result of this new study could be the next major step in understanding the fabric of the human brain, the most complex structure we know of. So just to let you know, my feeling on this, my insight of this is that the world and you and me have to be ready at this moment in order to absorb this information, in order for it to be discovered. Nothing gets discovered unless we can use it, and it's at the right time for each one of us to bring it into being. So think about the different dimensional processes of the brain and the connections that it can actually make. So this latest brain model was produced by a team of researchers from something called the Blue Brain Project, which you can just Google and go online to check it out. It's a Swiss research initiative devoted to building a supercomputer-powered reconstruction of the human brain. The team used algebraic topology, which is a branch of math used to describe the properties of objects in spaces, regardless of how they change shape. They found that groups of neurons connected into cliques, and that the number of neurons in a clique would lead to its size as a high dimensional geometric object. And what's got me going in this particular article is that Almin just sent an audio or posted an audio lately, and she talked about how as masters, as God beings, as we step into these new levels of consciousness and expanded awareness, that we then dissolve I think she called it the neurotrins or something like that, which is particles from radioactive contamination and toxins that are very relevant for us in our planet. And that's a whole new subject matter altogether. But you can see now, as we're linking what she is saying there to this scientific research that we're talking about tonight, how these two can go hand in hand and start to change things like that. The lead researcher of this Blue Brain project says that we found a world that we had never imagined. There are tens of millions of these objects, even in a small speck of the brain, up through 7 dimensions. In some networks, we even find structures with up to 11 dimensions. And I'm thinking that as our DNA has shifted and taken on more and more strands, and as it expands its awareness and its ability to conduit frequency, for example, as we bring different shifts and changes of transformation in consciousness into being, then of course the brain is going to have to adapt and bring in more of its own ability to expand and grow. So human brains are estimated to have around 86 billion neurons, with multiple connections from each cell webbing in every possible direction. and this forms a vast cellular network that somehow makes us capable of thought and consciousness. With such a huge number of connections to work with, it's no wonder we still don't have a thorough understanding of how the brain's neural network operates. But the new mathematical framework built by this team takes us one step closer to one day being able to have a digital brain model. Yeah, scientists are amazing. To perform the mathematical tests, the team used what they call a detailed model of the neocortex, which they published back in 2015. The neocortex is thought to be the most recently evolved part of our brains, and the one involved in some of our higher order functions like cognition and sensory perception. After developing their mathematical framework and testing it on some virtual stimuli, the team also confirmed their results on real brain tissue in rats. According to the researchers, algebraic topology provides mathematical tools for discerning details of the neural network both in a close-up view at the level of individual neurons and on a grander scale of the brain structure as a whole. And as they connected these two levels, the researchers could discern high-dimensional geometric structures in the brain, formed by collections of tightly connected neurons forming cliques and the empty spaces or cavities between them. And that's what I'm just really referring to at this moment, is that as all the dimensions around us collapse into one, as we move into a state of oneness, then the cavities that held so much space between everything is also collapsing at the same time. The matrices between the realms, the sponge materials between the realms that have held so much apart have all collapsed, and so time and space too has also dissolved completely. So, interesting that we're having this whole particular process. I don't need to go into the rest of the article, except just to share that as we grow into an expanded state of oneness, then so the physical structures of the body also begin to dominate within their own processes and allow themselves to expand and experience much higher capacity to connect. Right, so Almin tells us that the illusions that we had were the beginning of the human race. She says the past and its impressions, whether good or bad, are like ropes that keep us tied down to the old paradigms, preventing us from flying high with the wings of high magic. Absolutely in line with what she said in January and with the theme of the year of bringing high magic into play. And let's listen to Almin as she talks about the automatic violet light and how we can still begin to work with it. And some of you will recognize this because you have been sharing with me those experiences.
My beloved Light family, Ella will be teaching a very important series of webinars starting on July the 1st. It is with my full blessings and instruction from me that these very important principles will be produced. The main goal of this webinar series on the violet light and its automatic production within us is how to overcome and release past influence on the present. Once the violet light becomes a self-generated reality within, it automatically clears and releases all these ghosts of the past. She will be teaching you how to facilitate this, an important part of our journey. Many years ago were the beginning of the human race. In other words, they were built upon illusions, and the God beings embraced these illusions to create the shadows that outlined the light that created the form of life on earth. These 144 illusions, very much ingrained in all of us, are dissolved by the 144 tones of love. The tones of love form the alchemical equation that births the violet light automatically within. And the illusions are eliminated as the tones of love are lived. So I am very glad to see that this is part of the curriculum that you will be studying during these 3 webinars. It is an important step for those of us who are moving into a whole new reality of high magic. In fact, it is indispensable because the past and its impressions, whether good or bad, are like ropes that keep us tied down to the old paradigms, preventing us from flying high with the wings of high magic. Beloved ones, this is a highly recommended next step. I give you all my love and my deep respect.
You're back in studio with myself, Paul, and Nico is up on the sound and audio desk, and he's just let me know that there seems to be some Wi-Fi issue today, so you may have lost signal, hopefully not, but we'll only be able to check with the statistics at the end of the show. And thank you everyone for your comments. Just to let you know that we've put that Almeen link, Dropbox link to that Almeen meditation up on the WhatsApp group. And of course, anybody outside of that WhatsApp group is welcome to ask us for it, and we shall certainly send it off to you. Every little bit of work does at this moment in time in order to sustain the rate of transformation that all of us are experiencing. So during that audio, I managed to find the post by Almeen where she talks about Earth's transcendence and gives us advice on how to live in it. And this was to do with the comments I made about something called the neutrinos and the radioactivity. So the post goes like this. We actually read it about 2 weeks ago. She says, there's a few questions and some practical answers for living a new reality. It's called Earth in Transcendence. The question that was given to Almeen: what else can we do to support the success of the Earth's transcendence? How can we avoid the possible future of the Earth becoming more and more radioactive? Almeen's answer, she says, resurrected beings produce neutrinos that clear up radioactive pollution. As more and more masses enter this exalted state, the more reduction there is in radioactivity on Earth. We are the solution. Secondly, it is crucial that we believe the validity of the new reality we've created and will continue to create with the tools we are given, rather than yesterday's scientific data. Otherwise, we recreate the old scenarios. It's your choice what you want to focus on. Keep your eyes above the storm. You are the hope for a new tomorrow. And this is really in line with what Diane was sharing with us earlier during that audio that she sent us and we listened to at the beginning of today's radio show. And she was just saying is that we have to avoid all of these particular issues and news. And I know I've been watching the news. We've here in South Africa, we've gone through a tremendous upheaval of processes, absolute being slammed left, right and center. And then, of course, I watch the world news and some of the events that are going on, like in London, etc. And for me, I have to skim past them very quickly nowadays because I cannot get into the depth of it because the amount of frequency shifts that go on within me that I feel physically ill just actually looking and at the viability of it. But I think there's also become a deeper understanding, more and more compassion and feeling for humanity going on and growing within me. And that's my own take, my own insights as to where I'm at. You might have your own going on there, and I'd love to hear about it all. Right, you're listening to Radio Belvaspata South Africa. Today we're talking about waves of consciousness and transcendence, and I hope that the show is helping you understand where you are at this moment in time, that there's no right or wrong, that we are all imperfection, and yet we just need to keep working on understanding that, and yet not ignoring what is going on within ourselves and saying that things are okay when they're not, or things are not okay when they are, etc., etc. Not to get trapped in any of those dynamics, but literally to live more free and more easily within the self. And of course, through the teachings of the mystic and Seer Almin, we have the most amazing tools that she's given us. Tools of transcendence, I think, is the word for the night. Right, so Almin says that for many years she used to say that she's only sharing about 10% of what she knows with her students because that's all that they could assimilate at that time. She says this is no longer the case. There's a beautiful summer solstice ceremony coming up on next week. Coming up as a webinar, and everyone's being invited to share that. So let's listen to Almina. She shares the mysteries of the High Magician, and there we are back to high magic and moving into the summer solstice ceremony.
On the 24th of June, on a Saturday, we invite you to the free online event, Mysteries of the High Magician. It is a time for music, for art, and for listening to the principles of high magic. We have thus far received half of the principles of high magic. They have not come easily. I am reminded of the Norse myth that Odin crucified himself on a tree upside down in order to receive the Norse runes. It has been a time of living the principles, sometimes in not very easy ways, in order for me to have received half of them. This half we will be presenting. I am hoping that by the end of the year, I will have the remaining half. But as I've said, they come with intensive experiences on my part. They are very deep realizations. And what we have, we will share with you. It is an important event. It is a time of celebrating how far we've come on this journey, of celebrating that this is a global awakening of the Holy Ones. And it is my way of thanking you for the tremendous gift you are to me. It always was my deep desire to have those of pure heart and surrendered mind that can keep up with understanding and studying and living the work as it is received, so that we may walk our journey together. For many years, I used to say that I am only sharing about 10% of what I know with the students because that is all they could assimilate. It is no longer that way. And what I know is shared with you fully and completely. And as a result, it always comes like a flowing stream, more and more divine guidance, divine tools, and the ability to create our own realities. This event is an important step in creating the reality of the High Magician. Please join us. Experience the wonder of being able to talk to people in other countries all over that embrace this journey as passionately and as joyfully as we do. We will see you then. Mark it on your calendar, please. June 24th. My love to you always, beloved family.
And thank you for staying tuned to us. There we were listening to the Seer Almin talk about the mysteries of the High Magician process as we celebrate the summer solstice in an online ceremony coming up next week. So you can go on to spiritualjourneys.com or Almin Diary. They seem to be merging a lot of those particular processes together just to log in and to work with it. And I look forward to joining all of you on that one. What a time of celebration. But of course, that's if you're in the northern hemisphere. Here in the south, we are trying to find the perfection in freezing cold, windy, and very, very dry conditions that are going on. But yep, everything has its place, everything has its cycle and season, and so we keep rolling. Absolutely incredible. Right, so earlier on I was talking about some of the information, about how things are changing, the transcendence processes, the transformations that are going on. I was talking, about information that I downloaded, etc., and then talking about aspects of that everyone on earth is feeling the transformation. And it comes from a website which I enjoy reading because it's just so filled with love and direct energy of just looking at things as they are and not creating an identity and not judging it for what it is. And that website is called Love Has Won, by the way. So I'm recommending that if you want some great sustenance. And I know many of our Almin Light family around the world love that site because I see you all connected to it. And once again, thank you for sharing all of these things with me. The delight for me is being able to put it together week by week, and then with the other masters around in Team Belvaspatar as they add their dynamics into it, so the show comes on board. Really, really incredible. And yes, Darshana, thank you very much all the way from Canada for sending me some information half an hour before the show began. Quite fascinating to know that I'd downloaded it. And then just for the show, and then you sent me the same links. Isn't that fascinating? Really, really beautiful indeed. So what we're going to do now is just have a few minutes of meditation with some beautiful music, and I'd like to read a post and some beautiful spiritual wisdom by the spiritual teacher and healer called Matt Lakata, and I know many of you are also connected to his teachings as well. And so I'd like to just combine that with some music and his particular post, which has just come up. And it really just supports us where we're at this moment in time, knowing that we are the ones who bring all transformation in. So let's do that. To whatever degree we have not provided sanctuary for unmet feelings of abandonment, of loneliness, of shame and rage, we can count on our partners, on our children and close friends to continue to offer this opportunity to us in a seemingly endless number of ways. How painful. How excruciating. What grace. It is outrageous what love will do to reach us. The relentlessness of the symbols, of the signs and guidance, shape-shifting and taking unexpected forms in order to open a portal into wholeness, a sunrise, a tree, an unknown longing that appears early in the morning, the moon, a deer, the water, the clouds, the flow of emotion within you, While these ones may appear as ordinary visitors on an ordinary day, on an ordinary star, look again. Listen. Feel. Taste. Touch. As they dance their way into being, they pull back the veil so you can peer into the infinite, astonished by what is happening behind the scenes. It is anything but ordinary inside the crucible of your heart. As we descend into the muddy earth and ascend again into the heavens, we reclaim our birthright as embodied, tender, vulnerable human beings, willing to fall apart, to be a mess, to not know how it will all turn out, to forget and remember, and to return over and over again into the mind of the beginner, willing to participate fully in the chaotic glory and rare opportunity that has been provided here, to bear witness to the activity of love as it makes its way into form. There are no experts and no masters on the path of love, only her humble servants. Ever at the feet of the beloved as she pours her body into the world of time and space, standing in awe at the miracle, at the luminous play of dark and light, and the enfolding union of spirit and matter. And that's a recent post from Matt Licata. I hope you enjoyed that few minutes of some quiet time together as we listen to his beautiful words. And that's the end of our show today. So I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for listening here in South Africa. We have a public day off tomorrow. It is Youth Day, so please celebrate that with great fun and abandonment, and just appreciate the time to yourself and within yourself and with those around you. I'd like to say thank you to Nico for handling our sound desk tonight, and I'd especially like to say thank you to you for being part of our radio show every single week and for bringing everything to the fore. And it gives us great opportunity to be able to work on it and just work on ourselves and share that. We do hope that our radio show is a place of oneness, is a time for you to come and be part of the family around the world. And it's incredible to watch as the growing number of people in different countries join us week by week. If there's anything that you would like to share with us, if there's anything that you'd like to have on the show, if you'd like to be on the show, then please let us know, and we will happily work with you and create that space so that we can all just be one and have that special 1 hour together once a week live on radio. This is me, your host for the show, Paul, saying a good night and goodbye. Thank you for listening. And this is Radio Belvaspata, South Africa, tuning out until next week in love, praise, gratitude, and trust. Goodbye.
You've been listening to Radio Belvaspata, South Africa. Thank you for listening and sharing in our discussion. Should you have any questions with regards to the healing modality of Belvaspata or have any healing needs, please send us an email to info@belvaspata.co.za or add comments to our page on Spreaker.com so we can work on providing a suitable response. We now close this episode with the eternal ascension qualities of love, praise, gratitude, and trust, and look forward to sharing again with you next week. Goodbye.